Happy Freight Friday. We made it. This has been a really long week, everybody. Get your drink, get ready, stop working, just stop working. It's enough. Like, we've all had enough this week. It's been crazy. I'm MadGaines. I am your host of MadGaines Live. Sometimes the Boiler Room Boys put up that label, so I remember to introduce myself for anybody out there who does not know me, which you should know me by now. And you should also know our guest today, which is Kristen Johnson, who I'm going to introduce in just a minute. But first, I want to remind people of a few things. First of all, in October, end of October, beginning of November, make sure you have your ticket and you are ready to go to Chattanooga, because we've got the FreightWaves conference and you are going to miss out if you are not there. It's great networking. It's great to be in Chattanooga. You're going to have fun. I'm going to be there. That should be enough for you guys. You can meet the Boiler Room Boys. They're going to be there. Even though they most of the time they have an attitude with me. I think I just need to feed them more alcohol. So get your tickets, get ready, get hotel rooms. The Boiler Room Boys just said, please. And one other thing that do I see Beyonce? Oh no, that says Boys. I thought Beyonce was going to be at FreightWaves. I was like, stop everything. I'm going to call all my friends. All right, so I see a JB Hunt 360 after party. That looks kind of cool too. Get your tickets November 1st to 3rd, Chattanooga. And you all know the FreightWaves puts on the best conferences. The best. All right, the other thing I want to tell you guys about is Carrier Assure. Y'all know my company, Carrier Assure. Go to carrierassure.com. We make it easy for you to vet carriers, to select the right carriers for the right shipments. No more digging through FMCSA data and taking forever, and you can't scale on that process either. Check it out. Get 30 days for free. And while you get your 30 days for free, we're going to roll out our new dashboard. So we have a dashboard where you can upload your carriers, and then you can get a report on how your carriers are doing. So you can know that like 30% of your carriers are Fs, 40% are As, 10% are Bs, and you can get updates on your carriers and monitoring. It's all there for you. Thank you, Christian. My Boiler Room Boys got my back today. It's all there for you. Go get your free sign up at carrierassure.com. The promo code's right there on the web. And we're going to have like webinars and do all this great jazz with the new feature. All right. So now today we've got a great episode for you. Get your drink, strap in. We're going to bring Kristen on. If you don't know Kristen, you need to know her. She is going to be your person you're going to go to when you have legal problems in our industry. She knows everything and anything. I'm sure she's going to have a disclaimer. Everything and anything about logistics, about trucking, about anything that you need that comes from our industry. She is my go-to person, and everybody that I know uses her. So let's bring Kristen on, and let's see what Kristen wants to talk about today, because I'm very excited. Hi, how are you?
So, I was so prepared today, Cassandra. Look what I did.
Disclaimer!
Because I forgot last time, and then you reminded me, and I need to just make that disclaimer, because I'm about to talk about like all my law stuff, and everyone's going to take it away. Like, I got this great free legal advice from Kristen Johnson on Cassandra Gaines' show, and you didn't
and
get any legal advice.
Kristen said that da. You're going to be like,
right? I could hire that driver. Yeah, totally safe.
She said so, you guys.
Don't, no. All
right, so go ahead with your disclaimer.
This is not legal advice. That's it. That's really it. This is not legal advice for you. You should get legal advice from your lawyer, and it can be me, but not right now.
That was perfect. That was absolutely perfect. Okay, so it was funny because you texted me, and you texted me this image, or maybe you emailed it to me. There's this image, and it made my blood boil, and it was how difficult it is to manage and oversee owner operators versus independent contractors. And this is from the carrier's perspective. And I would love to talk about this today, especially since a lot of folks here, we have big carriers that watch this show. We have brokers who sometimes don't understand even what an owner operator really is. And they don't understand what a carrier has to do when they have to oversee an owner operator. And then what the difference is between an owner operator and an independent contractor. There's lots of confusion. So I'm going to let you take this and start from the basics and tell us what we should know to understand from a carrier's perspective, but also so the carriers can be like, yeah, Kristen's got us. She gets it. She understands.
Really, what I sent you was an image about how completely difficult it is to be a lawyer in this industry. And it's difficult. If I find it difficult to be a lawyer in this industry, and I think I'm decently smart, it's really hard for people just to function in the industry because the laws make your lives so difficult. That's why my job is difficult. And that's why your lives are difficult when you're trying to comply with the laws. And the point of the thing that I sent to you, Cassandra, was that there are a lot of kind of conflicting laws out there that govern what you're supposed to do when you're a motor carrier and I'll just run through them. The first one, you're required by the FMCSA and by your obligations to the public and your duties in general as a motor carrier to prioritize safety. I mean, obviously, that's a huge priority when you have trucks on the road. And there are so many regulations governing safety that you have to comply with as a motor carrier. As a motor carrier, though, you need to find capacity to do the thing that you're authorized to do, to put trucks on the road. And when you do that, one way that you do that is you hire independent contractors. And then what happens in my legal world is there's a whole layer of rules that apply to an instance where you're hiring an independent contractor. And you would think that those rules would match up, just perfectly with the safety requirements of the FMCSA. But they don't, because they come from a different interest, so to speak. They come from the interest of ensuring that independent contractors are actually independent and they're not employees, in disguise as independent contractors. And so there are a whole bunch of rules that say, well, when you're a motor carrier and you're hiring independent contractors, you cannot exercise control over those independent contractors. Well,
That's nuts.
Let me put this question out, right? Can you tell them to be safe? Can you dictate that they be safe? Or do you just have to determine in advance that they're safe by using, vetting programs or whatever, and then just hope they're safe, but you can't actually tell them to be safe? Or you couldn't tell them, you need to use certain monitoring equipment or whatever. Is that considered an exercise of control? Because frankly, in my view, just from a human being perspective and a mother perspective and a lawyer perspective, I kind of want companies hiring independent contractors or anyone that they're putting behind wheels to ensure that that person is safe, that is driving the vehicle. But then we have these laws that scare everyone that say, well, if you're hiring an independent contractor, though, you can't exert control over them. And so a lot of folks get scared saying, well, if I'm trying to tell you how to be safe, is that exerting control? And I've even seen legal opinions where I would think that requirements coming from a motor carrier dictating a certain level of control level of safety is perceived as control, and then puts a motor carrier kind of in this really bad position where they want to be safe on one hand, but they're afraid to exert control through safety requirements on another hand through their independent contractors.
This is nuts. And the thing
it's totally nuts.
You don't want, they're independent contractors or owner operators, so they're not employees. So if you control them too much, you could get in trouble. And with what the IRS, the state tax, you have to pay insurance and back payroll taxes and all that jazz. That right?
Yeah. Yeah, and lawyers' fees, because we're really expensive and we like to make money everywhere. Mm-hmm.
And we need to make money. Remember that, boiler room boys. Lawyers are good and they need to make money. And then the other flip side to that is that if you are, we need beer, they said.
The boiler room boys need beer. They do. They're pretty nice guys, by the way, Cassandra. I just thought I would put that out there. That the boiler room boys, they're really nice. They take care of you, Cassandra.
Oh my goodness! Don't give them too much credit. Run with it. And they have a lot of control with those buttons either, and I get turned off, and they think it's hilarious. And then they love you though. Here. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So here's the thing: is we've got, all right, we don't want to exercise too much control because you could be called an employee and we could have a big class action, have to pay a whole bunch of money, and then we have to exercise some control or have direction of some sort because you could get in an accident and we could also be liable for the accident. So what are you doing? You're dancing this little line of, oh, not too much control. Oh, wait, but I don't want you getting in an accident. No, we got to be safe. Oh, crap. I have to do all this stuff the FMCSA regulations tell me to do. What? Yeah. This is a dichotomy that's very difficult to balance. And then,
I think so.
Kristen, if I ask you, well, Kristen, which one is worse? Like when I talk about my exposure, can I prioritize one over the other in treating them like employees and exerting control and safety? Like I can't imagine. Can you answer that? Like that's a tough answer to give.
Not legal advice.
Puts up the disclaimer.
I can have this private discussion with you and give you legal advice, but my personal view is safety is number one, and I think that everyone would agree with that. And I do think, you know what, if someone brings a misclassification case and the the key piece of evidence that you have misclassified an independent contractor is the fact that you exerted too much safety control, and you said, hey, independent contractor, you know what, we have these safety policies and you need to abide by them, I would defend that any day. And frankly, I would just say it's a condition of contract. It's not an exertion of control. I won't contract with any independent contractor who doesn't meet these basic safety requirements. And I'd point right back to the FMCSA regulations and say, this is just what's required of all of us to do this job. This is not me exerting control. This is the government exerting control.
Yeah, it is. And that's a great answer. I love that answer.
Yeah. But people get scared about this. They really do. And I think a lot of times, unfortunately, safety gets deprioritized because of it.
I think so too. Let me ask you, so you separated out when we looked at those columns, you had the first column and then you had the second column said independent contractor, and then you had owner operators in another column. So if I'm a motor carrier and I'm hiring an independent contractor, is that independent contractor, did you mean like basically brokering or interlining?
Oh, that could also happen, yes. But I was specifically talking about the level of control that is exerted when a motor carrier hires an independent contractor to run under their authority. But I think the same issue applies to brokers as well. They are supposed to, there's a lot of debate about how much care a broker needs to exercise in selecting a motor carrier to run freight. I think we've even seen some articles on that as late as yesterday, but a broker does need to exercise a certain amount of care. There have been arguments that motor carriers hired by brokers could be misclassified independent contractors, but that is a much easier case to defend in my view, because brokers are in a different line of business typically than motor carriers. They are in the business of selecting motor carriers, but they will still get pegged under negligent selection theories at times. Now, I can give you all the legal defenses for that, but I don't think that's what we're here to talk about today. But yeah, it applies to interlining and freight forwarding and brokers as well. Yeah,
and I think that so when brokers often worry about treating a carrier as an employee, is there a chance that it could be used against them? Like if they exert the control over the carrier, they tell the carrier too much, maybe they're paying the carrier's drivers directly. They are the carrier's sole source of income. Could that come into play in litigation with exerting too much control in that manner?
Yeah, absolutely. I think when a broker is hiring a motor carrier, the concept of misclassification is a lot more difficult because I think to a certain extent, they would be hiring someone with motor carrier authority. So it would be a business that has motor carrier authority, because we're not giving people motor carrier authority. And that in and of itself, I think, helps establish independence from the brokerage. And the brokerage isn't in the business. You might have dual authority companies, which is its own special issue, but the brokerage as a standalone business is not in the practice of carrying goods or actually conducting the transportation. It's in the business of arranging transportation. And so I think that by nature of their business, they're telling a motor carrier what to do, in the sense that they're telling them to go from point A to point B, but ultimately the motor carrier is entering into a contract with them, agreeing to do it, usually on there's dedicated lanes, but it can be on a dedicated lane or a per load basis. And so there's a strong enough element of contract and a business to business relationship that you're really not in as much of a risk zone with independent contractors as you are when motor carriers are, say, hiring drivers. I think that's a much bigger issue.
And I wonder too, if you're in an accident perspective and the carrier gets in an accident and you've been telling the driver what to do and you're a broker, or you have been paying the driver directly, There is a little bit of an argument there that plaintiff attorneys can make outside the misclassification context. It's in more of like the accident context that you're the employer and you do have control as the broker. Yeah. So I think brokers, even though we're talking to carriers, brokers should pay attention as well to this aspect of control.
Yeah. Yeah. And then there's one more like complexity that I so I had a 3-part chart there. And I think that this is a trifecta of laws tussling with one another, but we have the FMCSA and all of the safety regulations that govern. We have the misclassification rules that then kind of frown upon exercising control, which can span into safety control. And then we have all of the truth in leasing regulations that apply to owner operators. And
yes,
tell you what, wow, that set of regulations requires,
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
A solid pair of reading glasses, really. That's what you need to know, is you need a solid pair of reading glasses to get through it. But it has a lot of very stringent requirements, and often for good reason. I mean, again, laws are put in place because usually they're driven by a policy reason, but they're not always put in place in full context with the rest of the industry. And so when you have truth in leasing regulations, you have very stringent requirements on the way leases are structured and settlements are paid out to owner operators who are leasing vehicles. And one of the requirements, and I'm not going to get into all the details of the regs, one of the requirements in the regs is that the leasing entity, the motor carrier that is leasing the equipment from the owner operator, they cannot require the owner operator to purchase or even specifically lease equipment from the motor carrier. And this becomes a problem when you're trying to implement uniform across the board safety equipment that is in vehicles, that often ties in now to, say, a sophisticated database that is designed to track the habits of drivers or to correct when safety violations are occurring, or allow for the vigilant monitoring of safety of anyone in the fleet. Well, if you have owner operators with whom you have leases that are subject to the truth in leasing regulations, and those regulations say you cannot require equipment, what do you do when you have specific equipment that you need to tie into your system? Do you just say, well, then you don't tie into our safety system? We can't use this wonderful, highly developed, sophisticated safety system with a whole section of our fleet. And I think it's a problem. I have quite a few clients that struggle with it. We have to sit down and say, okay, is there some way we can work carefully through these regulations to develop a lease that still allows for our standardized safety equipment without violating these regs, which if you violate the regs, that comes with a whole set of consequences, including legal fees, if someone sues you over it. And so are we discouraging safety there? No, go ahead.
Could we go back to, we have 7 minutes left. I don't want to, I just realized that John Radvansky came, the Rad Man came. Hi, John, glad you joined us. I wanted to jump back to the owner-operator piece, which is, could you give us a high-level overview of, so that brokers know as well, what carriers are responsible for with owner-operators so that they can understand there's a lot that goes into it. When you bring an owner operator, run under your DOT number.
Yes. Well, I mean, carriers are responsible. There was a whole lot of ways the answer to that question could go. Carriers are responsible for the performance and safety of those who are leasing onto their authority. That's number one. And so there's motor carrier selection that feeds into that. The FMCSA, actually, I wanted to bring this up. I've got 3 screens here, which is why I'm looking to the side, and I know I'm on a show and I should be looking at my camera, but I had to pull something over here. Good. Okay. So, one thing that's really interesting is that the FMCSA, publishes all of these safety ratings, and the safety ratings are the thing that determines who can be on the road and who cannot be on the road. And the FMCSA has issued guidance that is extremely clear about this. But a lot of times companies will develop motor carrier safety policies or selection policies that go beyond the FMCSA standards for determining who can go on the road, or sort of supplement the FMCSA's own determination of who can go on the road and who is safe and who is unsafe. And the FMCSA has made it extremely clear that unless they have given a motor carrier a rating of unsatisfactory, that motor carrier is a safe motor carrier to be on the road. But there's a whole lot that goes, yeah. and I always like to remind people
I just want everybody to hear that. Like, we never hear that when we're being sued when shippers and brokers are being sued for negligent selection. All the vetting standards get thrown in their faces. Articles come out throwing things in companies' faces. It's nuts that the FMCSA says that.
And they do. And I think motor carrier selection policies should reference that. And it's good to be safe, and it's good to have policies, and it's good to vet your fleet. And you should do that in whatever way your safety manager or safety department has determined to do so, and using whatever tools are necessary. But at the end of the day, the FMCSA is the one that is making the determination as to who can go on the road or not, because someone can get a motor carrier authority and they could load a trailer up with stuff and start driving down the highway, and that's their responsibility. And the FMCSA has determined that's okay.
That's absolutely crazy. And the thing is that these, I'm not even going to get into that. Could you also enlighten us, because we have 4 minutes left? I want to suck as much knowledge out of your brain as possible. Is there a difference between when a carrier says that they're hiring an independent contractor and when a carrier says they're hiring an owner operator? Is there really a difference between the two?
Owner operators are a form of independent contractors, but they own and operate their vehicles. So that is the biggest difference. When a company is hiring an owner operator, there is a lease of equipment that is typically involved in that, in addition to an independent contractor agreement, or sometimes they're combined together. It depends on the way that it's being structured, but they are independent contractors. Independent contractors can also be an independent contractor driver that does not have their own equipment. That is possible as well. But when you're talking about an owner operator, you're specifically talking about the fact that they own and operate their own equipment.
And when they own or operate their own equipment and they're considered an owner operator, do they run under the carrier's DOT number?
If they're leasing on the carrier,
Cassandra Trucking.
Yes, typically.
It's Cassandra Trucking, and I've hired Kristen Trucking, but really she's an owner operator. She owns or operates her vehicles. She's going to run under my DOT number. So if she gets in an accident, it's going to be reported under my DOT number, right?
Yeah. Yep, exactly.
That is a common misconception in our industry that I wanted to use you again to clear up, because people constantly get confused with that knowledge. When you have an owner operator as well, you have to onboard them, you have to bring in a driver qualification and have a file on them. You have to have a driver management file. There's a lot of vetting you have to do. So there's a lot, you guys, that go into having an owner operator. And the reason why I'm telling them is because we have a lot of brokers and shippers that watch this show, and they hear from carriers, oh, no, I didn't double broker. That's my owner operator. We have lots of owner operators everywhere. And what they are banking on is that you, brokers and shippers, don't know what an owner operator is. You didn't know what Kristen just said. You didn't know that detail, which is, it should be irrelevant to you as a broker and a shipper that they're an owner operator. They're running under that carrier's DOT number. That's the carrier you vet. That's the carrier that's responsible. And
yep, absolutely. If you're a motor carrier that is contracted with a broker, and you then hire an owner operator to run under your authority, you have a still accepted responsibility for what that owner operator does.
And I wanted to make sure that was clear, even though it's a sidetrack from what we had said, because we've been talking about these different concepts in our show today, but somebody had just asked that. And I'm like, all right, we got to clear this up, because every time I bring Kristen on the show, it's like most of the time I have to clarify this again, because there's so much misconception.
And double brokering.
Go ahead.
Let me say what that is. Okay. Double brokering is when a motor carrier is tendered a shipment by a broker, and then they turn around and they tender it to another motor carrier. That's double brokering. Now they might have authority to do that they might have brokerage authority. They might not have an agreement with the original, shipper or broker who tendered that load. But that's a contract issue. That's not a law issue specifically, or a regulatory issue. But double brokering is when one shipment is passed to another, and often it's totally allowed through co-brokering agreements or things like that. But it's very distinct from hiring an owner operator.
That was perfectly well said. Perfect to close out this episode. I thank you very, very much. I could have you come on every single show and teach us something new. So you guys, Kristen Johnson, reach out to her. She's on LinkedIn. She's everywhere. She's the person you're going to reach out to for help. Thank you for joining us. And for everybody else, have a great weekend. And the Boiler Room Boys say, send them beer. They want lots of beer. They work. Disclaimer. That's going to crack me up. You got to keep that.
Hey, freight brokers. Tide TMS has helped my brokerage increase revenue and scale to a whole new level.